happening, seventh graders? Hey, watch out for that boat. Oh, it's the Titanic. Because your homework this week was to read from Exploring the Titanic by Robert Ballard. Before we start, let's talk about a little bit information concerning the type of literature that Exploring the Titanic was. It is considered to be creative nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, whatever you want to call it. Well, narrative nonfiction, in order to write it, is something that requires great amounts of research, okay? The difference between nonfiction and fiction, we went over that in class. Nonfiction means not fake, not made up, and fiction is fake. And this story, Exploring the Titanic, was a true story of Robert Ballard actually out looking for the Titanic. And the aim of this type of literature, this genre, G-E-N-R-E, is to entertain while also sharing a true story. It's a true story written in the style of fiction, but it's nonfiction. The narrative nonfiction genre contains factual writing in compelling ways, okay? Facts are told about the story while the emphasis is on the whole idea of storytelling itself. And it must contain accurate information in order for it to be believable and researchable accuracy, I guess is the word as I'm trying to say. The primary goal of narrative nonfiction is to communicate information just like a reporter, I guess, and to be able to shape it in a way that reads like a novel. Excuse me. So you want the story to read like a novel, but it has to be accurate and true. Okay. When you're talking about this type of genre, you can consider biographies and memoirs and diaries and, literary journalism, chronicles, essays, and other types of things. When we're talking about Robert Ballard, though, he was after this Titanic for years, and he was lucky to find it, I guess, and out exploring for it. Narrative nonfiction is a way of having a fact-based category about storytelling and presenting facts in clever ways, but once again, it's got to be able to pull the reader in, tell the places, the people, the events in emotional content, okay? So that's basically a little background on what narrative nonfiction is. It's also considered to be informational text. Why? Because informational text is just that. It's giving us true information about something, and in this case, it's about the Titanic. Let's go over the Titanic. As you can see behind me here, it's a tremendous ship, or was a tremendous ship. You probably all have seen the movie. But the ship itself was just phenomenal. And if you watch the video prior to my YouTube video, you actually were able to see the physical science behind the building of the ship and how it sunk. So the Titanic was a British passenger liner operated by the White Star Line that sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on April 15th, 1912, after hitting an iceberg. It was her maiden voyage, meaning that it was its first voyage ever, and it left Southampton, England, to New York. There were about 2,200 passengers on board. That included the crew, and more than 1,500 of these people died, which made it the biggest maritime loss of life in a peaceful setting. Okay, I'm sure there were more during wars, but this was a peaceful setting, okay? At this time, the Titanic was the largest ship afloat. She entered service with the second of three different class sections. They always named it She's. I guess the boat was a she. And she was built by the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast. Thomas Andrews was the chief naval architect of the shipyard at the time, but he also died in this disaster. The Titanic was under the command of Captain Edward Smith. We learned this through reading Exploring the Titanic, who also went down with the ship. Was he the last one to go down with the ship? You always say the captain is the last one to abort the ship. I don't know. The ocean liner carried some of the wealthiest people in the world, as well as hundreds of immigrants who were going from Great Britain and Ireland, Scandinavia, getting their way to New York, where immigrants would end up trying to find a better life for them, their families, etc. The first class accommodations were designed to be of comfort. They actually had a gym, a swimming pool, libraries, high-class restaurants, and these cabins that were fit for kings and queens. They had telegraph, radio telegraph on board, which was available already, which was able to send messages not just out of the ship, but into the ship, throughout the ship, on how the operations actually worked. The Titanic had such advanced safety features, such as watertight compartments. Now, if you look at the video, which I hope you watched before, you'll see the watertight compartments and how they failed to keep the ship upright. But these watertight compartments were actually very smart, and there was just a little flaw in them that they overlooked. And they had these remotely activated watertight doors, and the only problem, it only carried enough lifeboats for about 1,100 people, and they had 2,200 people on board. So you can kind of think of who they actually were thinking about when they put these lifeboats on board, for who were those people going to get in them. The one reason they said that they didn't have enough lifeboats was due to the safety regulations in those days. They did not have to have lifeboats for all the people. They just only had to have them for 1/3 of the people. Kind of a crazy rule that only 1/3 of the people will be saved in case of emergency, as what happened here. Due to the maritime safety regulations in those days, the ship carried 16 lifeboats, which could be lowered, through ropes, and for a total of 48 boats. However, Titanic carried only a total of 20 lifeboats, 4 of which were collapsible and proved hard to launch during the sinking. If you've seen the movie, you see what I'm talking about. When we're talking about Robert Ballard, who was the author of Exploring the Titanic, he combines the story of a ship's first and final voyage with that of its rediscovery and exploration, skillfully capturing all the drama of both significant events. Ballard's long struggle was to fulfill his dream of finding the Titanic. Everybody always goes out looking for treasures. Well, his was to go out and find the Titanic. And from his first efforts at getting funding, because it's not cheap to go out and look for this thing, and he had to go out and find funding for it. And rival expeditions were also out looking for it at the same time. There were many equipment failures, because you can't just dive down in the water and look. There were, different pieces of equipment that failed, and they're expensive for, to actually go down and look. But his final triumph came when the video of the bottom mud from the unmanned submersible Argo, which was like a submarine, it was an unmanned submarine, suddenly gave this image of a wreckage. Ballard began searching for the Titanic using this information to track down the ocean liner. He speculated that the ship, as it went down, left a trail of pieces, because it had broken in half, and it would leave this debris field, which eventually led him to actually finding the uh, Titanic. In 1898, now this is what's really kind of interesting, and he talks about it inside the story, Exploring the Titanic. In 1898, this dude, this writer, Morgan Robertson, wrote this novel, The Wreck of the Titan. Okay, not the Titanic, but of the Titan. This was in 1898. He writes about this wreck of the Titan. It's kind of eerie. It's kind of scary because the Titan, okay, as it was said, was captained by a guy named John Rowland, who was a disgraceful naval officer who takes a job aboard this Titan, the world's largest vessel at the time. See the comparisons: Titanic, largest; Titan, largest. 1898. Well, Robertson describes it as unsinkable. Titanic was unsinkable, and among the greatest works of men. Same thing they said about the Titanic. Well, the Titan strikes an iceberg on its journey, sinks, and becomes one of the world's greatest tragedies. Now, The Wreck of the Titan is not narrative nonfiction. The Wreck of the Titan was actually fiction. So this guy writes about this story about this huge ship sinking by hitting an iceberg, and then in 1912, the same thing happens in real life. Okay, so the tale can almost be an exact retelling of the Titanic tragedy, if not for when it actually happened. In fact, that's what makes it even crazier. The similarities between the Titan and the Titanic go far beyond just hitting an iceberg. The length of time, the length of the ship of the Titan was 800 feet. The Titanic was 882 feet. The speed which they hit the iceberg was, the Titan hit at 25 knots. The Titanic hit it at 22.5 knots. The Titan had 2,500 passengers. The Titanic had 2,200 passengers. Wow, just crazy stuff, I would say. That here's this eerie, really comparison between the wrecks of two ships, one being fake and the Titanic being real, and we're looking at 1898 to 1912. Crazy if you say it. But, both ships were British owned. Both ships were hit on the starboard side. Now, if you know anything about a side of a ship, like I'm going to use my mouse here, this is the starboard front bow. Okay, that's where it got hit, down underneath my head. On the other side, if you go to the other side, so from about here all the way to here, starboard side, front bow, starboard, and then you have port is on the other side. Okay, so that's a little bit where information about a ship. I mean, I'm not a big ship guy, but I do watch Below Deck Mediterranean. Both sank in the North Atlantic, exactly 400 miles from Newfoundland. Both had severe lack of lifeboats, and the Titan holding 24 lifeboats, while the Titanic had 20. Wow, just a very interesting, excuse my papers, very interesting stuff about the similarities between the piece of fiction of The Wreck of the Titan and the Titanic. So when we read Robert Ballard's Exploring the Titanic, understand that it is accurate. It is narrative nonfiction. Yes, it reads like a story, but the facts are true. Where when we look at the Titan, The Wreck of the Titan, that wasn't true. That was just some guy making this stuff up out of his head. Pretty interesting, pretty phenomenal, if you ask me. So make sure you watch the video here and enjoy it. Just a short little YouTuber. So have a great day and enjoy life. Peace.